Hello, good afternoon. My name is José Velasco. I am part of the SAP Autism at Work program in the Americas. I have been with SAP for approximately 22 years. A great deal of my career has been in the space of technology, either creating technology or deploying technology for our customers at SAP. For those of you who are not familiar with SAP, we are the largest cloud enterprise software company in the world. We serve approximately 300,000 customers in approximately 190 countries. And an interesting fact about SAP is that the transactions, 75% of the transactions that make the world's GDP touch an SAP system. So lots of responsibility, and that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today in the space of software testing. But before we get much further, I would like to start with the problem of unemployment. It is known that 85% of people diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders are unemployed, even though 60% of people on the spectrum have above average cognitive abilities. And it is also known that many people who are employed are underemployed or partially employed. And one of the key questions that we need to ask ourselves is whether bias is getting in the way of great talent. What does this mean? Let me illustrate it with an example. Not long ago, I ran into a newspaper article back when we had paper newspapers, and I cut it and pasted the old-fashioned way with scissors. And the header of the article read, "Failure to make eye contact can alienate hiring managers." The article went on to say that establishing eye contact provides essential rapport for the interview process, but eye contact, the article states, is not the only what they call interview killer. Other things include failure to smile, inappropriate posture, bad clothing, perhaps too much fidgeting, or a weak handshake. These are things that we know that somebody on the autism spectrum would have challenges with. And I can tell you that if we would have used this as a method of filtering people at SAP through the Autism at Work program, we would have not hired anybody, but we also would have missed on tremendous skills and abilities that our colleagues on the autism spectrum bring to our organization. So let's talk a little bit about what is Autism at Work and when it started. Basically, the program was kicked off in May of 2013 with an announcement at Sapphire, which is the largest event, customer event that we have in the world, where we bring customers in and partners, and we talk about our latest solutions, we talk about the roadmaps, we talk about where basically the products are going. So very, very impactful event. In Sapphire of 2013, we announced the launch of the SAP Autism at Work program. And this was, of course, part of the vision of SAP to make the world run better and to improve people's lives. Why do we hire people on the autism spectrum? We're asked oftentimes. The first reason is because we want to attract the best talent in our industry. And as we know, talent comes in many different shapes and forms. We are firm believers that we innovate because of our differences and not in spite of them. So it becomes extremely important for us to bring a different perspective to our creative processes, including the autistic perspective. Alan Kay, a very famous computer scientist, once said that a different perspective is worth 80 IQ points. And again, we believe very strongly in that. We also want to tap into an underutilized source of talent. The more that we talk to universities, the more that we see neurodiversity programs taking shape, and the more that we see larger volumes of students that self-identify as being on the autism spectrum. And it is extremely important for us to not only provide an education to this student, but also a pathway to a career. And for us, looking at the very prolific source of talent that exists at universities on the autism spectrum, it became important for us to start thinking in terms of systems. How is it that we would be able to take some of these candidates and put them through a job interview process at SAP and ultimately a job? Additionally, we want to capture the special skills of individuals on the autism spectrum. So aside from having perhaps a degree in computer science or in business or formal education in some field or experience, we're also looking at those special talents and ability that many of us not necessarily have. Some people on the autism spectrum have the ability to identify patterns in systems and data, have the ability to focus on tasks for longer periods of time. So just to name a couple of them, but we try to capture those abilities because those are important abilities in the enterprise world. Lastly, retention. It's extremely important for us to retain our employees. Our program has proven through a very strong retention rate, upwards of 92% in the United States, that colleagues on the autism spectrum make for incredibly loyal employees. And of course, that adds a tremendous amount of value to an industry in which turnover rates, as we see in this industry of high-tech software, can result in the cost of replacing an employee that has departed being equal to anywhere between 40 to 100% of the yearly salary of that person. So the replacement cost of employees is incredibly high in our industry. And then being able to find somebody again that has the abilities and, let's say, the project background of the person that just departed and just come in and replace them, it's not as easy as that. Why? Because people have to be upskilled, people have to be familiar with the projects and the platforms and the environment and the software, and that takes time. Okay, that's where the replacement cost plays a significant role. Moving on to our next part of the presentation, let's talk a little bit about the global footprint of SAP Autism at Work. Let's start with the number of countries. The program today is deployed in Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, Colombia, China, the Czech Republic, France, Germany, India, Ireland, Mexico, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and the United States. We currently count with approximately 175 employees on the autism spectrum. This number changes, as you can imagine, on a regular basis. We add some people, or there might be people that were in an internship that are wrapping up that internship, perhaps going back to the university. Those 175 folks that are employed at SAP include, again, full and part-time jobs, internships, people that are working with SAP through a contract, vocational training, which we have very strongly in Germany. And then we also have a number of self-identified colleagues on the autism spectrum. These are folks that joined SAP independently of the SAP Autism at Work program. In other words, they did not use some of the accommodations and the processes that we have on the intake model, which includes an accommodated interview and pre-employment training. These are folks that applied for a job at SAP, came to SAP, started working for SAP, and then after that, they self-identified, some of them requesting some supports for their career. All in all, we have had more than 600 opportunities. You may be asking yourself, what's the difference between the 175 and the 600? In the 600, we include present and past paid opportunities. In other words, the 175, plus some people that may have taken an internship or were contractors where they had a 1 year or 1 to 2 year type of opportunity at SAP. It was not a permanent one, but also we open up the program to mentorship opportunities. I would say it was around 2017 when we opened that up, and we provided, again, opportunities for enterprise exposure for high school and college students. We'll talk a little bit about this in the next few minutes. So let's talk again about opportunities in what we call employee services. If we look at the original announcement from SAP, in 2013, we focused on full-time and part-time employment opportunities, but permanent opportunities for individuals on the autism spectrum. We also included jobs for contractors as well that are not full-time, part-time, or that are not permanent positions, but that are opportunities for somebody to engage in a company like SAP and get a job. The next area of opportunity for us was the students on the autism spectrum. And this is where we expanded the footprint of the program to include vocational school and internships, as I mentioned in the previous slide. But then we said, well, we learned a lot in this process. And interestingly enough, we had a high school teacher that came to SAP asking if she could learn a little bit more about what we were doing for professional employees, because she wanted to take some of those lessons back into the high school, where she had a number of students that were on the autism spectrum. So one thing led to another, and quickly we established a pilot program with some high schools in the East Coast and the West Coast in the United States. And before we knew it, we ran a number of students through these programs, and the engagements varied. Some of these high school student opportunities would be as basic as having a high school student come to SAP, spend maybe one afternoon, and maybe wear a badge for the first time, go to a corporate cafeteria for the first time, getting exposure to an enterprise environment. Another level of engagement was directly with the high school, where there would be a group of students that would come in once per month, maybe on a Friday, and they would have an opportunity to get to know SAP employees. Those SAP employees, which by the way are employee volunteers, would have an opportunity to share a little bit about their jobs, what they do for a living. They would include professional experiences. They talk about their day-to-day experience also on the job, as a means to do some level of knowledge transfer to these high school students, and for the high school students to learn a little bit about enterprise life. So during those sessions, the high school students would also have an opportunity to get to know some SAP employees, very young employees who may have recently graduated from college, that would share their testimony about the experience they had, the life experience of being on the spectrum, but also being very successful in enterprise life, with the hopes of inspiring these high school students on the autism spectrum. So we had a significant number of students that went through this program, and quite successful. 1 year we had 18 seniors, and out of the 18 seniors, 18 of them had an opportunity to go to junior college or go to college, a 4-year college, or get a job, or join the military. So quite a great degree of success. This is what we again call enterprise opportunities. But another thing that happened is we realized that we have employees in the company who have family members who might be neurodiverse. So we have a great leadership at SAP in the benefits organization. We brought this to the attention of our benefits team, and they contracted out with a couple of companies, Rethink and Cognoa, that provides us with services to perform assessment and support services for families or parents who have a child who might be on the autism spectrum. So again, this is not part of the autism spectrum, but what we see here is that something that started from the center, from full and part-time jobs and contracting opportunities, very quickly moved into the right-hand side, which is more in line with corporate social responsibility type of activities, but also to the left, affecting or impacting very positively some of the outcomes, particularly in the space of benefits at SAP. So let's talk a little bit about the roadmap of the program. The program, as we know, was launched in 2013, May of 2013 at Sapphire, as I had mentioned earlier. And it started with a series of pilots in 3 or 4 countries, where the idea was to try to understand, how a program like this looks in different geographies. For us, it became important to understand the cultural interpretation also of autism. The autism is maybe perceived differently socially in a country like Germany or India or Brazil or the United States. So it was important for us to get an understanding of the cultural aspects of autism in these different locations. The idea then was for us to learn from these implementations and consolidate those learning prior to entering what we call the transition phase, where we distilled those practices from different countries, coming up with 2 or 3 variants that would allow us to be more sure-footed in our implementations. And again, the main thing here is standardization of our processes. The next big area for us is what we call mainstream. Many companies that implement autism hiring programs will do it what we call at the program level. In other words, there's a group of people that are dedicated within a program, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 people, plus perhaps some volunteers that help with the launch of the program, the implementation. But as time passes by and that program grows, the activities no longer can be fully contained in the hands of 3 or 4 people that are part of the autism hiring program or autism at work program. So what becomes extremely important is that over time, the practices that are being created by this small group of individuals at the program level is transferred or lifted and shifted over to what we call the run, maintain organizations. In other words, every organization out there, every company has their own talent acquisition department, which maybe has hundreds of recruiters. It has HR business partners who are responsible for the well-being of the employees, once they start their career in a company. And those organizations have the ability to scale those practices and bake them into the standard processes of the company. So it's extremely, extremely important. And this is really a litmus test for the success of a program. Was it able to go from a program contained apparatus to the main processes of the company? So there's a lot of companies out there implementing programs, and many of them are in this process of shifting from a program operation to what we call a run, maintain operation, where again, you combine your autism at work practices with the core business processes of your company. So for us, that period of time started somewhere around 2017. And of course, little by little bit, we've been making these transitions. And we anticipate that this will be going on for a while. One of the questions that we get all the time is, what are people on the autism spectrum good for? And I thought that when we launched the program, we had an idea, and the general idea was that people would be able to work in repetitive tasks and in technology areas, et cetera, et cetera. So this gave way to some myths that I believe in some pockets of society are still very strongly believed in. One is that everyone on the autism spectrum prefers to work on repetitive tasks. That's far, far, far from the truth. We have employees at SAP. We had an employee one time that came to me and said, look, I am a musician. I am a software developer. I work in creative activities. Please don't say that we all like to work on repetitive tasks. That's not what I like. Another myth is that people with autism prefer to work alone. Again, very, very far from the truth. Our colleagues on the spectrum, like you and me, We want to belong. We want to be part of a bigger team. We want to be part of something bigger. Yes, some colleagues on the autism spectrum may have some challenges, with how to participate, how to integrate in a group. But that is why we have an Autism at Work program, to facilitate that and to create the accommodations and to make people feel welcome, that they are part of the larger group, of the larger part of the enterprise. The last myth is people with autism work mainly in technical roles. That again is far from the truth. Let me go ahead and share with you a sampler of some of the activities that our colleagues on the autism spectrum perform at SAP. Starting off with saying that colleagues with autism contribute daily to the success of our company. These are not token jobs. These are people in which our colleagues on the autism spectrum, again, add a significant amount of value every day. You can see here that they vary from very technical roles like software development, all the way to folks that are working in the human resources department as associates, people that are working in finance operations. We have data analysts, we have graphic designers, we have networking specialists. SAP is divided in what we call board areas, which are divisions of the company. Today, every division of the company, every board area is represented in the Autism at Work program. Now, there's 4 dimensions that we typically look at when we're looking at jobs. And let me start with the first one. The first dimension is what we call a job with well-defined rules. On the other side is a job with flexible thinking. And then we have jobs that are very autonomous, that you can do on your own. And then there's other jobs on the other side of that spectrum that are deeply collaborative, things like, for example, sales, okay, where you have to engage with customers and very people-oriented type of activity. And then you have some jobs that are procedural, task-oriented, where you are going to follow a certain number of steps. And there's, again, because there's well-defined rules, you operate in a very task-oriented capacity. And then on the other side, you have very creative roles. And when we say creative, it's not just creative in the sense of creating something, but being creative when it comes down to situations as well, okay? So there are going to be some jobs in which something is thrown at you every day that is going to be different, and you have to react to that. And there's also the creative angle of the actual job, where, for example, software development is considered a creative art, and it is something that requires collaboration and creativity. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. And then the last dimension here is a fixed known schedule, okay? In other words, you're gonna come in at, 8 o'clock in the morning, or you're gonna leave at 5 o'clock, your day is gonna look like this, and it's very, very well structured. And then you have jobs that have an incredible variability in the day. Not every day is different in the job, okay? So when we started the program, we were under the impression that all of the jobs that we were looking for were aligned here towards the left of this slide where my mouse is hovering right now. There will be jobs that are well-defined rules, autonomous roles, procedural, task-oriented, fixed known schedules. But very quickly, we started getting resumes from people that were interested in coming to work for SAP. And we started seeing that they had a variety of different skills, just like everybody else, right? And we said, well, let's start looking at jobs that are not software testing and data quality analysis, which were the first 2 jobs that we started with. Both of those jobs would be very well-defined rules, autonomous procedure, et cetera, on the left-hand side of this arrows. But very quickly, again, we moved outside of that area of the task-oriented job that you have on the left-hand side. And we have jobs today that are all over the place, including software developer. We have people that are working, supporting product management. Okay, in other words, folks that are talking to our customers on the phone, or that are doing presentations just like this one that I'm doing for you right now, in which you share information about the product and the roadmap and what are some capabilities about the product. And as you can imagine, if you are doing this type of presentation and you have customers listening to you, you're going to have people asking you questions that you were probably not prepared to answer. So that requires flexible thinking and creativity. Okay. So again, We have basically all kinds of jobs along these 4 dimensions, which tells us that folks in the spectrum, like a lot of people, can do. I mean, we have not been able to find the job that somebody has applied to where we find the business need and where there was a match between the skills and the job requirements, where the person in the spectrum was not able to do it. Maybe there was 1 or 2 occasions, perhaps, in which we needed to have a person find a different type of job, but we're talking about a very minimal exception. So what is the process of hiring folks on the spectrum at SAP? Before we go into processes, I think it's extremely important to recognize that we rely on our partners to work with us. This program would not be possible without the knowledge and the passion of a lot of our customers around the world. This is just a sampler of some countries and the name of the organizations that support us. Globally, we kicked off the Autism at Work program in 2013 in a joint announcement with Specialisterne, a Danish company that was a pioneer in the space of hiring folks on the spectrum for IT jobs. And they helped us get started in the pilot locations and subsequently helped us launch new locations, for example, Argentina, in Germany, for example. Today, we count with partners like Padea in Argentina or the Department of Rehabilitation in Pennsylvania and in the ARC in the United States. So again, it was an important thing for me to add here that without the support of these entities, it would have been very, very difficult for us to get the program off the ground. So what is the high level process that we use to hire folks on the spectrum? Before we go there, we need to share that there's 2 ways of bringing people into the organization. One is what we call the pilot mode. And in the pilot mode is basically you go and open a new location and the program is not established in that location. And you're looking at filling maybe 4 to 6 to 7 jobs to get the program seated and started in that location. We always go for, if we can, towards 4 to 6 employees, because that gives us an ability to get to understand, different personalities, different profiles, different types of jobs. And it really has worked really well for us to utilize that number as a starting point for a pilot. A pilot program is one in which we find the teams and positions at SAP basically before we have the candidates. So for example, I opened a new location a few years ago. I flew to that location. We promoted the program with the internal communications department for that location. And we invited managers and employees to come in to a 1-hour presentation on Autism at Work and invited them to be part of the program. And in that particular location, after we delivered our content, we had 4 managers that stepped up and said, I would like to be part of the pilot program. And I do have some openings in my team that I would like to use to bring maybe 1 person on the autism spectrum to my team. So again, this is where we identified the managers and the jobs ahead of time, okay? And then the next thing is, now that we knew the profiles for those jobs, we went out and we launched our candidate search in the pre-screening process. For this, of course, we relied, you can see some squares here that I'm highlighting right now, the local partner, and in cases where we have a government partnership, we bring in and we identify candidates on the autism spectrum through both government and local partner NGO. And they provide us with the screening services and with the identification of the first round of candidates. Then we go through what we call our pre-employment training program. So this is a training program that does not guarantee a job to the individual. The purpose of this program is for us to be able to get to know the candidates and for the candidates to get to know us over an extended period of time. So rather than having the traditional interview where you have one person sitting on one side of the desk and another person on the other side of the desk asking questions based on a resume, we invite people to join us for what this pre-employment training program. It accomplishes two things or three things. The first one is, again, for us to get to know the individual, and then for the individual to get to know SAP. The third one is also for the individual to really get a determination on whether SAP is something that is for them. We've had a couple of candidates that after the training, they decided that SAP was not a good environment for them. They wanted to maybe have a more local company, not as global, with less employees, less complexity, et cetera, et cetera. During this training, we cover a significant amount of material. We start with the idea or the principle that we don't want to train people for a job. We train people to be enterprise ready. Okay, there's a difference there. When you train somebody for a job, you teach them skills for that job. But because we don't know what jobs these folks are going to be taking necessarily in all of the detail that is needed, we try to get them enterprise ready. What does that mean? Well, you know, all those things that gives us anxiety when we're going to start a new job, like who is who, what is the terminology that they use in this company, what is a board area, what is an LOB, how do I interact with people? I mean, there's a lot of our colleagues on the spectrum that didn't have enterprise experience in the past, and you know, sometimes you may run into someone that does not know how to send a meeting request by looking at other person's calendars. All of these things are extremely important to reduce those anxiety levels and give the individuals a sense of confidence that they can walk into this opportunity with enough information to be able to hit the ground running on day one, okay? So we also cover materials related to SAP technology. So in other words, when they get a rounded view of SAP from an organizational perspective, locations, policies, things like diversity and inclusion topics, and then of course some technology, and again, general enterprise readiness training that includes, again, how do I send a meeting request, all the way to how do I participate in meetings, how do I interact with my colleagues, etc. So this is a very rich training. And then number four is once somebody gets the job, they actually go through the onboarding process. And the onboarding process is you go to a session where you receive orientation, you get your laptop, you get your desk. At least in the old days, now you get your computer and you get an internet connection like this one. And then what you do is you implement, or what we implement is the support circle, which I will talk about it in a couple of slides. But again, this is the process for the pilot program. And I want to highlight again that we pre-identify the positions, we have pre-identified the managers. So there are some jobs waiting for candidates in the end, okay? And at the end of the process, in step number 4, we would have selected, I don't know, if we had 10 candidates and we had 6 jobs, we would have selected 6 people for those jobs. Now, in some countries, like in the United States, if we had 10 candidates and we had 6 people that matched those roles and 4 people didn't, our partner, the ARC, or otherwise known as Neurodiversity in the workplace, they will look at the profiles of those candidates and perhaps try to provide them an opportunity to interview with other companies, okay? So to give you an idea, in the United States, I would say that a good 25% of the people that have taken the Enterprise Readiness Academy over the years have taken a job with companies that are not SAP. Moving on to what we call the mainstream process. So let's assume that you launch the location, the program is off the ground, you have it running for a couple of years, you did a couple of cohorts under the pilot mode. Now it's time to mainstream the program. And what this means is that, in a nutshell, is that people will come through the training, There will be no guarantee of a job when they wrap up the training. And we don't know what the jobs are. In other words, we did not go through the process of pre-identifying managers for the jobs. What we want to do is emulate a more realistic process in which, just like you and me, when we finish some training, whether it's university or technical or skills of some sort, then we go out and look for a job and look for a portal and try to find a match with the position, and we apply for it. And that's what we are doing here. So the first one is that within SAP, we start looking at the demand for a certain location, get an understanding as to where the skills are going to be. For us, I mean, we're a software company. We're always, looking for people that have technical skills, but it's not necessarily the only profile of people that we are looking at. We then go to what we call the candidate search and pre-screening process. So with our partners, we identify potential candidates on the autism spectrum. The NGO, the nonprofit organization, helps us with the initial contact, whether that's email or phone calls, and explains the program to the individual and, if applicable, to their family, with the consent, of course, of the individual. And then after that, they basically do some basic screening to make sure that the opportunity is something that matches the skills and abilities of the individual. The next thing is, again, we do the pre-employment training program, the Enterprise Readiness Academy. Depending on the location and depending on the type of jobs, this training will be 2, 4, or 6 weeks. In the United States, traditionally, we have done a 6 weeks pre-employment training, 3 weeks online and 3 weeks on site. Why is it important? Because we want people to get to know how to work in a virtual way. That's why we do the first 3 weeks. Of course, it also reduces costs, and it increases the familiarity of the individual with the folks they're going to be meeting on site prior to that taking place. Okay, and then the last are 2 weeks that are on site, not 3 weeks. 2 weeks on site, where they have an opportunity to have a corporate immersion. Actually, you go out to the actual building and you participate in this 8-hour workshops. You eat at the cafeteria. You have an opportunity to meet SAP employees. So it's a very high touch experience that gives you a full immersion into corporate world before you become an employee of the company. In today's world, of course, that is no longer the case. Okay, we don't have that immersion. Our hope is, of course, that when we come out of the current COVID situation, that we'll have an opportunity to reestablish that protocol again, because it's very, very valuable for people to actually come into the workplace and spend those 2 weeks with us. The last week of the training is virtual again. In that week is when we tighten up a LinkedIn profile, what we call a business profile, which consists of what we call a portfolio of assets that the person on the spectrum would have collected if they already had previous experience, or would have created through their activities in the training. Those information assets include things like maybe presentations that they did during the training, maybe programs that they may have written if they were programmers, maybe documents, okay, and research that they may have done as part of the 2-week project that was carried out on site at SAP. So all of this makes up the portfolio of the individual. And with this portfolio, that's what they take actually to an interview to talk to a manager. So after the training, again, there's no job waiting. There's no pre-identified manager. People actually go and apply for a job in the portal, okay? And in that case, you follow what we call the traditional approach. You go and apply for a job and wait for a response. But also the Autism at Work team is also keeping their eyes open for opportunities that may come up, inside of the organization, and where we try to match individuals to those jobs. Lastly, For people that actually go through the interview process and get the job, again, the interview is what we call an accommodated interview, where we offer the service to the autistic person to have somebody act as an interview mediator. And that person is a liaison between the manager and the individual, facilitates that interview process, works on the logistics, assures that the manager has all the information that he or she needs. And then you have also the preparation for the individual on the spectrum. In many cases, we request questions ahead of time from the managers that are provided to the individual so that they come better prepared to the interview process, okay? And again, once the person, assuming that they get the job and the interview went well, they go through the process of being set up, the onboarding that I discussed earlier. And this is when we also provide training to the manager and to the teams. Now, this is something that is important to highlight. This training has to be at the discretion of the individual on the spectrum. It's a disclosure and it's a privacy thing. The manager would have already known, very likely, that the individuals in the spectrum, because they went through the interview and the accommodated interview, but not the entire team. So it is really up to the individual on the spectrum whether they have an opportunity to, or provide an opportunity for the entire team to be trained, okay? Moving on to the support circle. Once an employee is hired, we have two support circles. The first one is what we call the New Colleagues Workplace Support Circle, that consists of a manager that would have received autism awareness training. There's an HRBP that supports that manager as well. And then we have a person that is a team buddy. A team buddy is not too different than when you and I started our careers and we needed for somebody to hold our hand a little bit, to tell us about the job, about the quality levels, about when you needed to turn in the work, et cetera, et cetera. So this is somebody within the team that basically helps you unfold all those complexities related to your new job, okay? And then we have what we call the Autism at Work Mentor. My feeling is that this is the crown jewel of the program. These are employee volunteers that are outside of the team of our new colleague on the autism spectrum. They have periodic activities, they meet regularly, and pre-COVID dates, they would go together to have dinner at a restaurant, maybe play video games, maybe have pizza and movie night, things to that effect. And again, they are volunteers, and they are basically a resource for our colleagues on the spectrum to expand their personal network and have that one person that you want to have a conversation with outside of your team, okay? And then lastly, we have what we call the Job and Life Skills Coach. In the United States, this Job and Life Skills Coach would have been a person that participated as a co-instructor in the Enterprise Readiness Academy, the ERA, the 6 weeks pre-employment training program I was mentioning earlier. This job is extremely important because it is a resource for the new team manager, for the team buddy, for the Autism at Work mentor, as well as our colleague on the autism spectrum. And that Job and Life Skills Coach is also a proxy for communications for any external support that our new colleague on the spectrum may have, including personal counselors or family. So of course, as you can imagine, this communication here is implemented with the necessary authorizations for disclosures from our colleague on the autism spectrum as well. Okay, there might be situations where, for example, some years back, we had a recent college graduate. He had a 3.8 GPA in computer science. But his earlier experience when he was in college was that, mom and dad paid for the tuition. He lived in the dorm, so he didn't have to, sign contracts or anything like that. And he also did not have much experience with cooking food. So why? Because he was in the meal cafeteria plan at the university. And now he found himself in need of finding an apartment close by SAP. having to procure his own food, and procuring transportation. So the job of this job in life skills coach is not only to provide support as they are integrating in the company, but if there's things like that outside in the personal support sphere of the colleague on the autism spectrum, this job in life skills coach provides that level of support. Okay, they receive funding by vocational rehabilitation department in many cases, not in all cases, and that helps complement that service that they provide. Okay, so one of the questions that we also get is how do you start a program? Let me just start by saying that we need to do the 3 P's. One is to partner. Okay, the other one is to pilot, and then the other one is to promote. And when we say promote, is promote internally. So what that means by using those 3 P's is that you want to start with a small subset of individuals, maybe again 4 to 5 people, if at all possible, in different departments. Once you have your program in place and you have an idea as to what it looks like, partnering with NGOs that provide you with the support for training and job coaching is absolutely essential. So I encourage you to consider partnering with organizations. There's entities like Evo Libre in California. There's entities like Neurodiversity in the Workplace in the Philadelphia area. There's a lot of programs, a lot of entities. Specialist Journey is another one. The Precisionist is another one. So, once you start asking questions, you'll find that there's a lot of providers out there that fill this space. So again, partnering is extremely important if you're trying to launch a program. And lastly, once you get into that part of the life of the program where it's going well and you have successes, you need to promote that internally within your organization, because this promotion is what gets other people in your company, assuming that you work for a large company like I do, to get to know that there is a program and that there's opportunities. And these are people that may come to you and say, yeah, I may have a job for somebody that we may consider somebody on the spectrum for. And that allows you again to create a buzz within the organization and attract more interest. Another question that we get asked all the time is, what is the business impact? And I'm going to speak fairly generically about our own experience. There's great companies out there like JP Morgan Chase, EY, Microsoft, MITRE, et cetera, that are implementing programs like this. And they may be able to give you a different set of benefits, but across the board, they're fairly uniform. So what I'll tell you is fairly generic and hopefully applicable to those companies. But I encourage you to talk to them as well and get their perspective on how they implement their own programs, number one, and number two, the benefits that they drive from the programs for themselves and also for the individuals that they hire. So let's start with 4 areas. The first one is in products. The second one is in human capital management. The third one is customers and partners. And the last one is in social and purpose. On the product side, we have seen at SAP results in the area of innovation. We had a colleague that I will speak to you about here in a few minutes who won the #1 innovation competition that we have at SAP. Well, it's not a competition per se, but it's an award on people that are being innovative in the company. They have hundreds of entries on a global basis across 190 countries. And the sole winner of the innovation award this year was a colleague by the name of Nico Neumann, who is in Argentina, and he came through the Autism at Work program at SAP. We have some colleagues that are working in quality functions like data quality and software testing, so we have an impact for sure there. We have colleagues that are having an impact on productivity. Okay, great performance. And then as we start looking into the human capital, the human resources area, One thing that is extremely important for companies like ours is employee engagement. One thing is to come to work every day and do your job. But another one is to be really engaged and be part of the heartbeat of the company. And that's what many employers are looking for out there. So if you have an employee, retaining that employee is important for us and for them to feel that they are, again, part of the DNA of the company. And then the next area here is attraction and retention. And I'm not speaking only about individuals on the autism spectrum. Not long ago, I had a conversation with a vice president in the marketing department who on day 2 of her job reached out to me and said, I want to tell you how much I like this program. And I asked her how important had it been for her to decide in coming and joining SAP. And she said, all things being the same, this was a key differentiator for me to come and work for SAP. She mentioned that she was very fond of companies that had this more progressive practices that were very inclusive. So we have a number of people that, again, fill that criteria, and retention has been, of course, an incredible thing for us, an important thing for us. So I guess when we have employees and they're happy and they stay with us, it's good for the company, it's good for the employee as well. So it's one of the benefits that we have. And then customers and partners, we have had an incredible journey here. We've talked to hundreds of organizations out there, ranging from universities to civil societies to government to private sector. The conversations have been just wonderful. And as a result of these conversations, there's been a significant number of programs out there that have been kicked off. And some of the people with whom we maintain a very close relationship, and we speak on a monthly basis with our, again, companies like Microsoft, EY, JP Morgan Chase, and a number of other companies, with DXC as well from Australia. And we have events that we do together. We share our perspectives. We participate in panels. We exchange best practices and try to learn from one another. So it transforms the relationship that we have with those customers and partners to be a much more purpose-driven relationship, which, in my opinion, is very gratifying and rewarding from a business perspective and from a personal perspective. The other thing is important is community impact. We have been doing a significant amount of work in the community by sharing the program. We started something that we call the Autism at Work Summit that I will mention to you in the next couple of slides, in an effort to share what we have learned and what our peers, again, these companies that I mentioned earlier, have learned as well. We are eager to share that with the community and get more companies to provide more jobs for people on the spectrum. And then I think that the most significant thing is the impact on lives. I think that when we think in terms of lives, we think in terms of the lives of people on the spectrum, but the reality is that it's impact on the lives of everybody. The experiences that our managers, our colleagues at SAP have had by working with somebody who brings that different perspective into the organization has been very rewarding in most cases. And I feel that the value that it adds, again, to the lives not only of our colleagues in the spectrum, but those of us that are around them, has been one of the greatest rewards of the program. So I was mentioning the Autism at Work Summit. That's something that we created. We launched at SAP in 2016, where we realized that we were having many different conversations with many different people in universities and NGOs and in government and for-profit organizations, etc. And we thought, why not get together for 2.5 days somewhere and, number one, get to know each other. We're all rowing in the same direction. And the second thing is, why don't we exchange experiences and practices and maybe partner in ways to improve the processes and the outcomes for people on the autism spectrum. So as a result of that first initial launch that we did at SAP in 2016, the next one was carried out at in the Bay Area in Palo Alto. Very thankful that we had an opportunity to launch it at Stanford University in 2017 in partnership with Microsoft, with DXC, with DXC Hewlett Packard, with EY in Microsoft. The next year we had a partnership with JP Morgan Chase, so that created one more sponsor. But 2017 really marked the first time that we had a big conference. We had about 700 participants between virtual and on-site. And since then, we have two summits, one in the East and one in the West. The one in the West is typically something that is organized by Microsoft, of which we at SAP are part of that summit. And then the one on the East Coast is one that we organize with other partners that include EY and JP Morgan Chase and DXC. And that's basically how we have East and West. The summit is also been launched in Argentina, in Australia, in New Zealand, and in India. So now we have this event in 5 locations, 5 countries. And we're looking forward to continuous expansion on this. As I was mentioning, the single most important thing is the impact on lives of the program, on everyone's lives. Again, I want to reiterate, not only the lives of colleagues on the spectrum, but the lives of many of us around them. And at SAP, we have something that we use as a motto. It's called bring everything you are and become everything that you want. And these colleagues on the autism spectrum exemplify that. Mark Jessen is a good friend of mine. Okay, he came to SAP about close to 4 years ago. Mark had a very rough personal history in the sense that he had been homeless at some point in his life before he came to SAP. Mark is a catalyst at SAP, which is the highest level of performance that we have on employees here in the company. And just a fantastic friend, a fantastic person to talk to. And remember that we were talking about a different perspective is worth 80 IQ points. Talking to Mark and learning about his personal experience and what he went through in his life and seeing him succeed at this level is incredibly inspiring. It has allowed me personally to learn from him, to appreciate my job, to not complain too much, and really to appreciate every day for what it is. We have Nico. Nico Newman is the colleague I had mentioned earlier that won what we call the Hasso-Plattner Founders Award, which is the highest recognition that we have amongst our 100,000 employees for innovation. So in 2019, Nico was the sole recipient of this award for an innovation that he created, again, in his home country of Argentina on behalf of SAP. Then we have individuals like Patrick Biesti, who may have applied to dozens of jobs out there. And he graduated cum laude from the university. And I remember him telling me back in 2014 that most of his peers who had not graduated with honors like he did from the university had a job, and he was falling behind. So he came to SAP, got a job. He's been in the project management area, where we all know that in project management, you need to be really good at organizing, prioritizing, and communicating things that have been known to be deficits of people in the spectrum. But Patrick has a full domain of those disciplines, and he's been with us now for almost 7 years. And he, in year number 2 of his employment tenure at SAP, he was invited to speak at the United Nations on Autism Awareness Day You see him here sitting in front of the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and the ex-governor of Delaware, Jack Markell. And then we have other colleagues like Gloria, who bring not only a computer science background with great knowledge in this area, but also she's an opera singer. Okay, and you see her singing here in front of thousands of fans during the kickoff of the New York Giants versus the Philadelphia Eagles Monday Night Football game. This was an incredible experience, as you can imagine, and it was memorable not only for her, but for all of us that are friends of Gloria. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation. It's what I want to highlight is that we are trying to take this extraordinary skills that we see in individuals in the spectrum and make them ordinary in the workplace. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to the organizers of the conference. My sincerest thanks go to Scranton University for providing me with this incredible opportunity to share a little bit of our program and a little bit of our journey. Very thankful for this opportunity. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to our friends at Scranton, and they will route the questions directly to me. All the best to you, and have a great day.